AITA for refusing to attend therapy with my sister, who's in inpatient psych care after years of violence. Even if my parents say I'm sabotaging her recovery, I, 16M, grew up in a house where family never really meant safe. On paper, I have what looks like a normal family. 2 parents who try to do their best, and an older sister, 17F. But for as long as I can remember, she's been violent. Not moody, not cranky, violent. When we were kids, there was no rhyme or reason to it. She didn't pick one target and stick to it. Anyone unlucky enough to be within arm's reach could get hurt. Sometimes it was other kids at school who got stuck sitting next to her. Sometimes it was me. And since I was closest, I was the one who took the brunt of it. I remember being little and thinking that siblings fought like this in every family. But when I showed up to school with bruises and cuts, teachers noticed. Twice before she was even 10, CPS got involved. I'll never forget those interviews. Sitting in some office while a stranger asked me to point out where she hurt me, lifting up my shirt to show scratches, explaining how I got black eyes or marks around my arms. At that age, I didn't even know how to explain it beyond. She gets mad and hits me. The second time CPS got involved, they told my parents to give me a lock for my bedroom door and to make sure we were never left alone together. Imagine that. Being a little kid and being told you needed to lock yourself in your room to be safe from your own sister. It wasn't just a suggestion either. It was for my protection. That's when I started spending a lot of time at my best friend's house. His family became my second home. I bring an overnight bag and sometimes stay there for days just because it was the only way to have a break. They never complained. If anything, they seemed relieved to give me space from whatever chaos I had at home. Looking back, I realize how much that family probably understood what was happening, even if I didn't tell them everything. Meanwhile, at home, my sister's behavior didn't stop. She'd apologize sometimes when adults forced her to, but it never felt real. She'd lash out again within days. My parents tried therapy back then, but nothing stuck. They said she had evaluations, but I never heard an actual diagnosis. Either they didn't want to tell me, or they didn't get one. All I knew was that she was dangerous, and nobody seemed able to stop her. As we got older, her temper didn't mellow out. It escalated. By the time I was in middle school, I had learned to flinch whenever she walked by. By the time I was in high school, I had scars from some of the worst fights. And yet, inside my house, it was treated like a storm we were all just supposed to weather. There's something soul-crushing about realizing your childhood home will never be your sanctuary. For me, home meant deadbolts, hushed arguments, CPS visits, and my parents whispering about how to manage my sister's behavior without ever really protecting me from it. I thought things might change as we got older, that maturity would calm her down. But deep down, I think I always knew this wasn't going away. And I was right. As we got older, her behavior didn't get better. It escalated. The fights weren't just shoving matches or sudden slaps anymore. They turned into full-blown assaults that left me with injuries I couldn't hide. Teachers and friends began asking questions more often, but I always gave the same vague answers. At home, I learned quickly that telling the truth didn't change anything. It only made her angrier. By 2018, she was expelled from school for the first time. The official story was violent behavior, but that was putting it lightly. She had attacked another student so severely that the teachers couldn't justify keeping her enrolled. My parents scrambled to find another school, insisting it was just a phase. But I knew better. Every time she came home frustrated or bored, I was the one who paid the price. When she was expelled again in 2021, things hit a breaking point. That time, the violence turned directly on me. One night, after an argument about something stupid, who got the bigger half of a sandwich of all things, she snapped. She slammed me against the wall so hard my head cracked back, and I remember everything going blurry. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital getting scans to make sure there wasn't permanent damage. I spent days there, terrified, wondering if I'd ever feel safe again. She was sent for her first inpatient stay after that incident. For a week, the house was quieter, calmer, and I could breathe without flinching at every sound. But as soon as she came back, the cycle restarted. Because my parents hadn't gotten her into a new school yet, I was stuck home with her most of the day. Within weeks, she tried to choke me out during an argument. Another time, she deliberately aimed for my head again, like she wanted to pick up where she left off. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just angry. She was dangerous in a way that made my skin crawl. Every time she looked at me, I wondered what she was planning. My parents tried to manage it. They set more rules, tried to monitor us, but it was impossible. She was unpredictable. I started living at my best friend's house for weeks at a time. His parents never asked too many questions. They just let me stay, fed me, gave me a room to breathe. Meanwhile, back in my own house, my parents were crumbling. They couldn't control her. They were scared too, though they never admitted it out loud. By then, her behavior had spilled far beyond our home. She started running away, getting into trouble with the law, and hanging out with people even worse than her. I'd overhear hushed conversations about the police being called, about her getting picked up after being gone for days. One month, things got so bad that I didn't spend a single night at home. I lived entirely with my best friend's family because every time I stepped through my front door, she'd threatened to kill me. And the worst part? I believed her. When April came around this year, my parents finally got her into an extended inpatient psych stay. I don't know the exact details. They worked with CPS and some charity funding to cover what insurance wouldn't. All I knew was that she was gone, and for the first time in years, I felt safe. I could sleep through the night without listening for footsteps outside my door. But with her gone, a new kind of dread settled in. I started to wonder, what would happen when she came back? Would anything really change this time, or would it be more of the same? When she was admitted for the extended inpatient stay in April, the shift at home was immediate. The silence felt foreign at first. I didn't realize how much of my life had been lived on edge, ears straining for footsteps, body tensing every time I heard a door slam, sleep interrupted by the creak of floorboards outside my room. Suddenly, the house was still. For the first time in years, I could sit in the living room without feeling like I had to keep one eye on the hallway. My parents, though, were different. They seemed relieved too, but not in the same way. For them, it wasn't about safety, it was about hope. They spoke in hushed tones about how this was the best chance she had ever had. They said the facility was good, that the therapists were experienced, and that maybe this time something would stick. I listened, but I didn't share their optimism. Hope had never protected me. Locks on my door and distance from her were the only things that did. Still, things were calmer. For those first few weeks, I started to feel like a normal teenager. I could focus on school. I could laugh with friends without the weight of dread hanging over me. But every time my parents came home from visiting her, I saw it in their faces. They tried to hide it, but their eyes gave them away. They looked unsettled, sometimes shaken. Eventually, I overheard them whispering late at night. That's when I first heard the words antisocial personality disorder. They didn't say it directly to me, but I picked it up from pieces of their conversations. They mentioned other things too, diagnoses, therapy goals, treatment plans, but that one phrase stuck. It explained so much. The violence, the lack of remorse, the way she'd smile after hurting someone as though it was nothing. I should have felt validated. For years I've been treated like I was exaggerating, like I was just unlucky to have a sister with anger issues. Now there was a name for it, something that proved I wasn't making it up. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt exhausted. Labels didn't erase what she had already done. A diagnosis didn't undo the scars, the hospital visits, the nights I lay awake listening for her threats. And the worst part? Even with the diagnosis, nothing about her seemed different. My parents would come home from therapy sessions and try to talk about progress, but then they'd let slip the details. How she screamed at them in session, how she called them names that made them cry, how she told them she hated me for existing. I could see the cracks in their hope every time they got back from a visit, even though they kept insisting this was helping. One night, I finally asked directly, "Do you think she's actually getting better?" My mom hesitated before answering. "The doctors say she's working through things," she said carefully, but her voice betrayed her. She didn't believe it. Not really. By July, her therapist had a new idea: family sessions. My parents went along with it eagerly, desperate to do whatever the professionals suggested. I didn't. The thought of sitting in a room across from her, listening to her spew venom while some therapist nodded and took notes, made my stomach twist. I didn't want reconciliation. I didn't want closure. I wanted peace. And peace, for me, meant staying far, far away. For a few months, I'd finally felt safe. Now, with my parents pressuring me to step back in her orbit, I could feel that safety slipping again. When my parents first told me that her therapist wanted to start family sessions, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it felt so ridiculous. After everything that's happened, the bruises, the hospital stay, the nights I slept with furniture wedged against my door, they really thought sitting in a room with her would help. I told them immediately no. I didn't want therapy with her. I didn't care about building a relationship. I didn't care about helping her recover. All I cared about was making sure I wasn't assaulted again. But my parents insisted. They said family sessions were part of her treatment plan, that it would help her stop the behavior, that it was the only way she could learn to change. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, they'd been told to protect me. CPS told them to lock my door, to never leave us alone. But now suddenly it was my job to sit across from her and risk being re-traumatized, all for the sake of her progress. I dug in my heels. I told them therapy might help her, but would do nothing for me. I didn't want to hear her apologies, because I knew they wouldn't mean anything. She'd say sorry in one breath and threaten someone in the next. And even in therapy, she was still spewing hate. I'd heard enough from my parents after their sessions. How she called them failures, how she screamed that she wished I'd never been born, how she admitted, casually, that she fantasized about murdering me and dissecting me like a frog in science class. What kind of person hears that and thinks, yes, let's get her brother in here too? The more my parents pushed, the more I realized we weren't just disagreeing. We were on completely different sides. To them, This was about saving their daughter. To me, this was about survival. They looked at me like I was heartless when I said, I don't care if she gets better. But it wasn't about not caring. It was about self-preservation. I'd already lost too much of my childhood to her violence. I wasn't going to give up more. They tried to guilt me. My mom told me that refusing to attend therapy was sabotaging her recovery. My dad said that if I really wanted the abuse to stop, I had to participate because that's the only way she'll learn. I told him I didn't buy it. If she truly wanted to get better, she wouldn't still be saying those things. She wouldn't still be blaming me for her misery. At one point, I snapped. You're asking me to sit in a room with someone who's told you she wants to kill me. How is that safe? How is that healthy? They didn't have an answer. They just repeated the same lines about understanding, forgiveness, and family sticking together. But forgiveness doesn't undo scars. It doesn't erase nights spent hiding or the feeling of being hunted in your own house. And it sure as hell doesn't stop someone who doesn't even want to change. So I refused. And for the first time, I think my parents really looked at me like I was the problem. After I refused the family sessions, the tension in our house became unbearable. My parents didn't drop the subject. Instead, they doubled down. Every conversation circled back to therapy, as if my refusal was the only obstacle standing between my sister and getting better. At first, they tried persuasion. My mom would sit next to me at the kitchen table, her voice soft, like she was explaining something to a stubborn child. She's sick, she'd say. This isn't her fault. She doesn't know how to express herself the right way. If you go to therapy with her, it'll help her understand you better. I stared at her, stunned. She doesn't need to understand me better. She knows me just fine. She's been beating me up for years. What she needs is to stop. My dad took a different approach. He tried logic. Therapy is about healing the family, not just her. If you don't participate, it shows you're unwilling to try. How do you expect her to get better if you won't even meet her halfway? That was the moment I realized just how upside down their priorities had become. They were asking me, the kid who had been strangled, slammed against walls, hospitalized, to meet her halfway. I told them point blank, I don't want to heal with her. I want to be safe from her. That's it. That's when things shifted from persuasion to blame. My mom's patience cracked. You sound heartless, she said. You don't even care about your sister. What kind of person doesn't want their own sibling to get better? Her words stung, not because I believed them, but because I'd spent so long trying to convince myself I wasn't crazy for wanting distance. For once, I snapped back. What kind of parents expect their kid to sit in a room with someone who's told you they want to murder him? What kind of parents choose the abuser over the victim? Silence filled the kitchen after that. My mom's face hardened. My dad's jaw clenched. Then he said something I'll never forget. Maybe you need therapy too. For saying things like that, it felt like a punch in the gut. Not only had they dismissed everything I'd been through, they were now suggesting that my refusal to risk more trauma made me broken. As if protecting myself was proof I was just as sick as she was. That night, I heard them talking behind closed doors. My name came up again and again. They said I was being difficult, that I didn't understand what was at stake, that I was being selfish. At one point, my dad even said, if he keeps refusing, she may never recover. Does he want that on his conscience? I wanted to scream. How had it become my responsibility to make sure my sister recovered? I wasn't the one hurting people. I wasn't the one running away, getting arrested, threatening family members. All I had done was try to survive her. And now, I was being told survival made me cruel. It broke something in me. For years, I had hoped, quietly, secretly, that my parents would one day see things clearly, that they'd finally put me first. But listening to them try to pin her success or failure on my shoulders made me realize that day would never come. To them, I wasn't the child who needed protecting. I was the obstacle standing in the way of their dream that one day she'd be normal. Now the house feels more toxic than it ever did when she was physically here. At least back then, I knew who the danger was. Now, I feel like my parents have turned against me too. They look at me not as their son who needs protection, but as the one sabotaging my sister's recovery. They keep saying I'm cruel for not wanting to help her, that refusing therapy proves I don't care about family. But the truth is, I stopped caring about being a family with her a long time ago. You can't strangle someone, slam their head into walls, threaten to kill them, and then expect them to sit across from you in a therapy session and play nice. Do I feel guilty sometimes? Yes. Part of me wonders if I'm heartless, if maybe I should just go to one session to prove I tried. But then I remember the bruises, the hospital stay, the nights at my best friend's house praying I wouldn't have to go home. And I remember that she doesn't just hurt me. She tells therapists she wants to dissect me like a frog. How do you heal that? My parents keep saying I'll regret this, that one day I'll wish I had tried harder to connect with her. But all I want is peace, safety, a chance to grow up without living in fear. AITA for refusing to go to therapy sessions with my sister, even if my parents say I'm destroying her chances of recovery.